I tell you guys, as soon as I get home, opening up all these windows. It's so nice out. Not nice enough for shorts yet, but definitely nice enough to open up the windows and let the kitties take a look at the birdies. I should get a bird feeder for the deck. That way the cats have something to watch. Maybe a trip by the store is due. Yeah. Anywho, welcome to the Unwashed Asses, episode 103, recorded for Friday, on Friday, April 5th, 2019. There's this robin perched outside my car, pulling worms up out of the ground, and he's kind of lazy in how he folds his wings, in that, yeah, they're at his side, but they're kind of straight down where the tips of his feathers are dragging on the ground. Kind of like a kid wearing an oversized sweater. And every now and then he'll pull a worm up out of the ground and he'll just kind of look at me. You know, it's not much, but it's a living. It's endearing. And that's what made me think of getting the bird feeder for the kitties. Because, they have a couple windows to look out, but not much to look out. I don't think they appreciate the wonderful, majestic view of the valley that we have. Maybe because their little kitty eyes can't see that far. I don't know how cat eyes work, but I imagine they would like something to look at, like, some birds. So, I'll have to take a look at the lease. I think I can get a bird feeder. Oh, that's kind of how it goes with me in spring, is like, I'm not super outdoorsy. I hate gardening with a fucking passion. But every now and then every spring it's like, all right, well, I'll go get a hanging plant. I'll take care of it for a week and a half, or I'll want to go do this or upgrade this, something outside related, and then promptly ignore it because eventually summer rolls around and it's like, all right, fuck all that outside nonsense. Yeah, it looks nice, but it also looks hotter than hell. Lock everything up, turn on the AC, keep it at a nice, constant, cool 68 degrees. Because nothing is worse than working outside all goddamn day in the heat, coming home, and it's still hot in the apartment because the windows have been left open. I'm not casting judgment. I'm not pointing fingers. I understand you work in an office all day that is air conditioned, and as is the case with most offices, they keep the air conditioning a little chilly, so you appreciate the heat. We're coming at it from two polar opposites. Maybe I just need to turn part of one of the rooms into an ice box so when I come home I can stand in it and defrost. I always liked that when I worked in food service. When it was super hot outside, even like when I did delivery, and the summer is just fucking killing you, it was always nice to walk to the back of the store or the back of the kitchen and go into the walk-in freezer and just let the cold wash over you. There's few better feelings in the world as far as like, I need immediate relief. Hey, the walk-in freezer is gonna do that trick nicely. And it's surprising how long you can stay inside of it when you realize just how hot it is outside. So that's not what I'm looking forward to. I'm not going to enjoy that. But rather than rehash the opening of last episode, why don't we get into the meat of this episode? Now, fair warning, so it's going to be pretty video game centric, kind of like the last one was. But more so, I want to drill down on the recent article by Jason Schreier over at Kotaku. I've talked about it a few times in previous episodes about Anthem, BioWare's latest. God, I don't even want to call it an abortion because the game got released, but is stillborn the appropriate term here? It's still alive, but I don't know how for how much longer. Anthem, developed by BioWare and published by EA, was supposed to be the next greatest thing in the looter shooter genre, where Destiny currently reigns as king up until this most recent announcement of Borderlands 3. And The Division 2 had come out to resounding praise. Like, everybody seems to be in love with that game. And then EA had Anthem. Now, before I get too much further into Anthem itself, have you guys seen that trailer for Borderlands 3? It looks fucking amazing. Like, this was the king, the pioneer, the originator of the looter shooter genre, and they nailed it. They didn't fuck around with PvP. Yes, there was a Coliseum in the first game, but it focused mostly on PvE content and ridiculous guns that rained from the sky. You would go on a mission and get just oodles and oodles of them. And granted, they're all permutations of one another where, Jacobs follows this typical model and Maliwan follows this. But they all had little variations, and you're eventually chasing to find that one perfect weapon. And it's not like Destiny where there's a quote-unquote god roll. Everything was kind of unique and fit to different play styles. On top of it, the writing, except for Borderlands 2, was pretty top-notch. And, Borderlands 2, I guess, was alright. I just have a bias against the Birch family, which isn't fair to them. Like, they do wonderful work and they're praised. It's not for me. But that being said, Borderlands 3 looks it's so good. We got the returning cast of favorites. We have guns with tiny itty bitty legs there they can walk and shoot on their own, and the psychos have looks to have formed a religion, and we have new big bads, and we have 4 new characters. We have a new siren that effectively has gigantic muscle lady arms and will make 6 phantom Hulk arms that beats up people, and there's a robot wearing a fucking peacoat looking thing. Like, it all looks so good. And because Gearbox and 2K have knocked it out of the park pretty much with every iteration of Borderlands, most people are rest assured that, Borderlands 3 is going to be fucking amazing until it was announced to be an exclusive title for the first 6 months on the Epic Store. Now, the Reddit community, Imager, essentially the internet, as I see it as a whole, is in a bit of a tizzy regarding that exclusivity. They will post numerous graphs and complaints saying the Epic Store has this problem and that problem, and I don't want to play my games across 2 different things. And it seems oddly reminiscent of the console wars where, Sony had a shitload of super good exclusive titles this generation. If you had an Xbox and no PS4, yeah, you're kind of left out in the cold. But I don't get why people on PC are bitching about this, because, spoilers, you can run multiple launchers on your computer. I already have, Steam and Battle.net and Origin and Uplay. I'll probably add the Epic launcher on there. Yeah, it kind of sucks that I'm going to have to add my friends through another service, but it doesn't mean I have to spend $400 on another console or build another PC just to play one specific game with friends. No, you can have multiple launchers, and as long as you secure your account, it shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, Origin has terrible security, but that's why 2-factor exists. If they do get your password, they're not going to get the authenticator, and you're still good to go. But I digress. I'm really worried that when Borderlands 3 launches, it's going to take Destiny and The Division 2 and really every other game in this genre to task, and has the potential to show us how inadequate they are. But that being said, previous iterations of Borderlands haven't really had longevity to them. You have the main story and then you have some DLC, but typically they're all story-based and focused. There's not much of a long-lasting grind, which is why it's easy to kind of get in and get out with them. Whereas Destiny, Division, and potentially Anthem are designed as games as a service where they're meant to last for, Destiny is supposed to be a 10-year-long game. But no, getting back to Anthem, Anthem launched with a bevy of problems, which I'm not going to get into, but essentially everybody had the feeling that it was, for the most part, an unfinished game, and that we paid $60 or more to be beta testers for it, and it was rushed out, it was unpolished, it's not finished. And Jason Schreier, through months of diligent work with his contacts, consisting of current and former employees at BioWare, kind of confirmed all of it. That a game that had supposedly been in development for the past 7 years and was announced at E3 2017 with a release date originally of fall 2018, which got pushed back to February 2019. They didn't start designing the game in earnest, or I should say creating the game in earnest, until after that E3 presentation. E3 presentation was hobbled together footage of a build that got approved by one of the higher ups within EA. It's like, oh, I like this, which included flying, which had been put in the game, removed from the game, put in from the game, removed from the game, and touted wildly as one of its biggest selling points. Until that last build got approved, it wasn't going to be in there. Even the name itself, Anthem, was shoehorned in at the last moment because BioWare or EA, both, either, couldn't secure the rights to the initial title they wanted beyond. So, rather than just kind of work with it, they rewrote the entire story to make sense around the title of Anthem. It's pretty bad. And explains why the story was so hobbled together and rushed and generic and predictable. Lead writer David Gator had left the project years ago. David Gator was the guy who had taken care of the Dragon Age series, the first game I loved to pieces, didn't play the others, but he wrote a series of books based in that universe as well that was just astounding. I loved him to pieces. But apparently he had been tapped to write a specific kind of story, and the development team wasn't happy with that, and he wasn't happy with what was happening with it, so he walked away. I'm going to pause this here. Okay, side note here as I unpause the recording. When did driving gloves stop being a thing? I just had an elderly couple walk up to their vehicle, and he took the time to get out a pair of driving gloves, and it was fucking adorable. Sorry, more people pulling up than I expected or would like, but what do you get when you sit in a public parking lot? Anywho, where were we? Gator had left, and they weren't happy with it. So yeah, essentially they cobbled together a game in about a year and a half, and it's definitely showing. Again, it was supposed to initially release fall of 2018. They pushed it back, but EA had a hard release date of like, you cannot release it any later than March 2019, which was the end of their fiscal year. It was a mess. It was riddled with bugs. It was largely unenjoyable aside from the story, and I was one of the rare few. Like, granted, the main story sucked ass. I love the side content. I love the characters and the NPCs because that was still something that BioWare did right. And I guess that was the problem with the project itself, was EA and BioWare was confident that BioWare was able to pull out some of their notorious BioWare magic and would ultimately save the project. But this is not the case. A lot of the devs that were responsible for BioWare magic, have long since left the company. So if there's no magic makers, how are they going to make magic? This is ultimately part of what led to their last title, and Mass Effect Andromeda, being a flop, which canceled any plans for sequels on that particular series. Not Mass Effect as a whole, but Andromeda, even to the point where they scrapped the planned DLC, which was strongly hinted at in the game itself. Now, it could be argued that Andromeda, after they spent a couple months fixing all the bugs, was a decent game. Granted, not as good as the original trilogy, but that's a high bar to meet. But it wasn't enough to save it. And the same appears to be for Anthem, where the game's not even fixed. But yeah, they could follow the route of Destiny and ultimately pull out of the tailspin, but at what cost, you know? BioWare at this point has burned their fans twice in a row. And EA is a company that is prone to axing developers that cannot deliver. Everybody was afraid that's what was going to happen at the ending of Andromeda, but they got another chance. And now that Anthem has kind of flopped, we're worried that the same is going to happen. Now, I don't believe that EA is going to axe them right away, because based on Schreier, there were two teams that were in charge of running Anthem, the Edmonton team and then the Austin team. Edmonton's already been pulled off of Anthem, and they've begun work on potentially Dragon Age 4, whereas the Austin team is now effectively taken over. And the Austin team is the one that had released and worked on the Star Wars MMO, Knights of the Old Republic. So they have a little more experience in this, and I can relate them more to like Destiny's live team, which when the primary team on Destiny kind of dropped the ball and wasn't able to deliver when they were working on the big releases, live team came in and fixed things. And most notable with this was like Rise of Iron, after we had a big long content drought because essentially Team A hadn't gotten Destiny 2 ready yet. Team B, the live team, stepped in and really upped the ante. And the Austin team for BioWare is adamant that they're going to be able to turn things around, and they're super excited, and they still believe in Anthem. And I want to believe in Anthem too. At its core, it could be a super fun game if it works. The game's still riddled with bugs, though, which makes it difficult to play. It is a gigantic resource hog, which kind of alienates a lot of people that could play it unless you're on console. You need a bit of a beefier PC to run this. Dan, one of my good friends, had to upgrade his computer just to be able to play this game. Even trying to run it at lower end settings, it would just repeatedly crash. On top of it, you know, the core gameplay loop isn't super fun, and with no loot to really chase in the game, no build variety, and no customization, which is the thing I look for most in a game, it's not there. So if it's not there, there's no reason to play. There's no additional story content at this time. There's no weapons or builds that people can really experiment with because the drop rate's so poor. And cosmetics, again, my entire reason for playing. I don't like repeating myself, but I can't stress this enough. The entire reason I wanted to play, aside from recommendations by a friend, was I love big robot things. I love knight type armor, which is why things like For Honor and Destiny jive with me. Like, I get to make a future space knight with guns and, you know, shoot aliens in the face. And I get to customize how they look. Yes, sign me up. And Anthem did not deliver on that front. And the core gameplay loop, like every 30 seconds, what are you doing in the game? What is it always reduced back to? Isn't enjoyable in Anthem because the shooting is a bit of a mess. Enemies don't react. The guns don't feel impactful. Powers are iffy going from class to class. And flying, the big thing, you're constantly having to manage it because of the overheating. So core gameplay loop isn't great. Whereas in like Destiny, core gameplay loop is fantastic because, and I've said this since I started playing it, no game has felt as good as Destiny does when it comes to just shooting things. Like firing off a gun, punching enemies, popping off your powers. It is all so gratifying at that base level, and from there it only builds with the stuff that you can do in the game. But if I'm just having fun doing the bare minimum, then I'm in good shape. And Anthem doesn't have that right now. Now, I'm not at the point where I want to uninstall because, again, I've been on this merry-go-round before with Bungie. Yeah, they fucked up Destiny 1, they fucked up Destiny 2, but eventually they turned it around. I'm hopeful that the $60 I spent wasn't a waste, and that I can return back to Anthem and have something fun to do outside, that they add on to it and they can continue on. Because while I no longer have the blind faith in the company, I kind of lost that once Andromeda got destroyed in the reviews and Dragon Age 2 veered wildly off the course from the original. There are still, I can only think of one person who still has this much blind faith in the company. And I asked him about it. I'm like, so, what do you think? He's like, well, I still love BioWare. I'm going to buy whatever they put out. And I enjoyed Anthem. There's just nothing to do. And I can't fault him for that. I've backed so many losing horses. Everybody's got their own, but in this case, it's like everybody's bad suspicion and conspiracy theory kind of turned out to be true, and it was all really brought to light due to the phenomenal journalism of Jason Schreier. I abandoned Kotaku as one of my primary news sites for games years ago, but there's still a few gems around there, and Schreier is one of, if not the most important voice in gaming journalism, just because of how seemingly unbiased he is and how hard he's willing to work on article after article, not just at Kotaku, but like the New York Times. And this, I don't know if you'd call it an expose, because I don't know the exact definition for that, but this piece he released was 11,000 fucking words. That's a third of a way to being technically considered a novel. That's fucking 3,500 words past novella or short story qualifications on a video game. Now some just say, oh yeah, well, it's just a video game, but this stands as not precedent, but it again sheds light on an industry that notoriously works hard on crunch time with people on salary and abuses developers' passion for gaming and exploits it with 80 plus hour work weeks, to the point where doctors are ordering mandatory vacation time so they can de-stress, not for like a day or two, but for weeks and months at a time, because of how hard the industry's pushing. And we're at a point where I firmly believe that the gaming industry needs to have a collapse like it did in the 80s, where publishers are demanding too much out of developers and expecting so much money out of consumers, where you're paying $60 for a base game, plus you have the DLC, which could be lumped up into not just a pass like it used to be, like, oh, pay $50 to get all the DLC. No, we have multiple seasons now where you could end up, again, I'm well over $120 just for Destiny 2 alone. But you're continually investing in these games. And when they're released in shoddy, unfinished conditions like Anthem was, it does nothing for me but breed mistrust in the publishers themselves. And something's got to give, where indie developers are hitting it out of the park with small studios, but they have passion. The games aren't being bogged down with, like, don't get me wrong, Anthem's a beautiful game, but pretty doesn't matter if gameplay sucks. And that's something these indie studios have realized. Yeah, they can get away with pixel art and graphics that aren't super great, like this Risk of Rain 2 that everybody's raving about now. It's not a pretty looking game, but the core gameplay loop is fun, it's engaging, and most of all, it's at a super accessible price where, it's only $20. It used to be $20 will get you a copy for yourself and a friend, but still, $20 for a game that plays extremely well? Sign me the fuck up. Rather than spend $60 on a game where, yeah, arguably I can get 20 hours of story content out of it, that's story content that I'm not necessarily enjoying. And then I'm also dealing with bugs and broken game that will crash not only the game itself, but in the case of like PlayStation players, it would shut their entire console off. So if I'm not having a good experience, was that $60 worth it in comparison? No, it wasn't. It's been at this point for a while now where the publishers are greedy and they're trying to meet expectations and appease shareholders, where games like Call of Duty and FIFA can rake in $500 million but still fail to meet expectations, and where publishers will shut down developers even though the game did remarkably well. Like, video games are the most profitable entertainment industry out there, but because they are not making literal garbage trucks full of money, they'll shut down a developer and reassign those assets to other things that are just more lucrative. It all comes down to that bottom line. And when you have things like FIFA eating up a lot of the resources at EA because it is one of their biggest money makers, and when you have DICE rolling out an engine that EA then forces every other developer under their umbrella to use, despite Frostbite being a terrible fucking engine to work with, which caused them nothing but problems. It's like fighting your own system. In the piece that Schreier had written, based on commentary by former and current employees. It's like, why not just license the right to Unreal? Oh, because it saves us money by having you use in-house stuff. Does it though? Because we're spending more time fixing bugs that we could easily squash if we were working in an engine that was designed to work better for situations just like this. But no, because the shareholders aren't making enough money, the problems get passed down to the developers, which then gets passed down to the consumer, and ultimately nobody's happy except for the people who just got their pockets lined. If you care whatsoever at all about the video game industry, or even want a glimpse into it, or about business management processes and how middle management just kind of sucks across the board, it's definitely worth a read. He also has a fantastic piece, again, in the New York Times about why video game industry needs unionization, and that's not a topic that I'm going to tackle with, out serious research, because unions are a big fucking topic and I don't want to misquote anything, whereas I can pretty much half-ass anything else. But no, it puts us in an interesting place, and I'm very curious to see how Anthem shapes up in the future, if it even has a future. So, if you have your own comments, concerns, questions, criticisms, complaints, or critiques, or even just want to comment on anything I've talked about here or in previous episodes, drop an email over at theunwashedasses@gmail.com. And of course, as always, tell a friend about TUA. Let them know they can get the show wherever they get podcasts normally. Help us grow. Help us spread our wings. I've got an idea for a cult, and I can't do it unless we have more people. I mean, I can put out a recipe for some velvet cake to appease the blood god, and, we'll do this together. But until next time, blood for the blood god.